Is there, you mentioned Sri Lanka, you were doing things in Kosovo. Is there anything in terms of what Nonviolent Peace Force has done that you think is an exemplary action, a kind of a case study that could describe how you got in, what you did, and how it was successful?
Well, let me give a prior example first. With Peace Brigades International, it's doing similar work. But in Guatemala, in the early 80s, there was genocidal violence against, especially the indigenous population, but against everybody who wasn't 100%, but behind the government, which was military. And it was most of the people in the civil society. Civil society had ceased to exist. Either people were killed, or had been disappeared, or imprisoned, or fled the country. It was a state of terror. And in that situation, in early '85, a group called the Mutual Support Group, the GON, came together. They had all lost family members who had been disappeared. They came, mostly indigenous people, came to Guatemala City with pictures of their loved ones, and many of them were in bare feet because they didn't have shoes. Walked down one of the main streets. I happened to be there at the time. And were chanting, where are they? And the president of Guatemala had gone on national television and said these people are all subversives and communists, licensed to the military to open fire. And I was with Peace Brigades International, just walking along on the street with a little camera and a notepad, and some change so we could try to make a phone call. And I've never been so afraid in my life when the firing would start. Luckily, it didn't start that afternoon, but two of their leaders were assassinated in late February, early March of '85. The other leaders, who were women, came to Peace Brigades International and said, our pain is so great we can't remain silent, but we don't want to die. Can you accompany us? And Peace Brigades International had only 3 or 4 people there at the time. Gulped and said, we will try. And so for 2 or 3 years, they accompanied them day and night. When they took their children to school in the morning, when they went to church, when they went to organize, when they were at the office, when they came home at night. And none of the other leaders were killed. And gradually, their courage gave courage to others in that society, in the human rights organizations, the religious groups, in people who had fled the country, including Rigoberta Menchú, decide, well, if I'm accompanied, maybe it's safe enough to go back. And so gradually you had a return to at least the beginning of a civil and democratic society. Well, those women say we wouldn't be alive if it hadn't been for Peace Brigades International. And the other organization, the people say we wouldn't have had the courage to become active again if it hadn't been for these women. So, that's a small example of where a relatively small number of courageous, nonviolent internationals going not to direct what's going on or to come up with the answers, but to be there as nonviolent bodyguards to help make it safer for the local courageous people to do their work. So that to me is and that's been written up in a book called On Our Bodyguards by Leah Mahoney and Kiki Iguren. And they talk with military leaders and all the folks that were involved there. That's an example of what we need to do on a larger scale.